All right, let's talk about what it would take to reach 2,000. It's obviously a round number, but more importantly, it's kind of the beginning of serious competitive chess. At 2,000, you will start being able to play in open sections where you are going to be facing other title players, FMs, IMs, GMs, and you will be dangerous to them at 2,000 as well. So it's a big achievement to reach 2,000. As a coach, it's significant to me because I've had several students who I've taken from around 1800 USCF to 2000. Now, granted, USCF is more like 1950 FIDE, but it's a very similar journey. And those were epic coaching journeys for me. A lot of disappointment along the way, a lot of learning for me as a coach, what the practical problems are to get to 2000. And there was so much trial and tribulation in those journeys that they've really been imprinted on my memory. And I have a student right now who's also on that journey. So very common, very interesting journey about personal fulfillment more than anything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by looking at the cohort here. And this is our cohort. One of the first things I want you to see is that people are allowed to choose their own rating system, okay? And in contrast to lower rated bands, I want you to see here that most people are saying either FIDE or USCF, i.e. over the board. And this is a big difference because when you are focused on playing over the board, your play is just going to become much stronger. Online, people are distracted. I think you see that in the video I did of the road to 1900, right? People are distracted online and they move quickly. And so it's a real graduation. There's far less people, for example, in this cohort than the one before it too. Why? Because we're just getting less and less people statistically as you move up the ranks. So that's the first thing I want you to see. The next thing I'm going to just point out before we move to this game that we're going to look at is we're going to be looking at Timpe here. And he has actually made it. Now, some people... He's got 2007. Some people kind of wait until their rating has stabilized before they move on. So we are going to be looking at somebody who's actually made it here with the FIDE. He's in Holland, and he's done the work. Even though we've only been, ChessDojo has only been doing the trading program a couple months now, he has definitely put the work in, especially with going over his games. Okay. So what I think we're going to see, by the way, before I even want to start this, I want to say we are going to see a real difference in quality in this, in Timpe's game. His name's Tim. In Tim's games, both in terms of the play, but also annotations and the work he's been doing on the side. So let's take a look. So first, just optically, I want you to see how much words he's got. There's going to be some variations later, but I really like the words he's talking about, plans. He's talking about his approach to the game in just a very free way that I like a lot. So, actually, let me expand this so you can see a little bit better. So, this first thing that he says I really like a lot. On E3. I don't know the exact theoretical moves, but I just play my normal moves. Now, what I love about this is really, to me, what it reflects is, and I looked at several of Tim's games, is that what he's got is not like some deep memorization of openings, but he's got like some basic structures that he understands. And whether you are a GM or someone trying to make 2,000, that is far more important than memorizing some kinds of lines. And I'm going to stress here throughout that I really like his understanding of a lot of the positions that we're going to look at. Now, I'm just going to make a couple small critiques of Tim. This is just mostly for his benefit. I feel like he's doing great, though, really great. By the way, something he's also been doing I really like is he has been giving constructive advice on the analysis of other players' games. And that's been one of the challenges of the dojo, is to get people to do that, also just to see the value in it. And what you can see is his articulation is, obviously he's doing it for himself, but if you can articulate what's going on in another person's games, it will help you, especially if you have to articulate it to somebody who might not get it right away. Okay, minor point I just want to make. One thing that's funny about the normal moves is in this position, queen c2 and e3 are the standard things. The reason that queen c2 is often played instead of e3 is that some people don't want to face this, though honestly it looks pretty good to me. Some people, though, don't want to face this with the two bishops. So that's why they play queen c2 first. Now, I will explain why that is kind of interesting or funny in a second. All normal moves. And now Tim plays queen c2. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with this move, but it's just interesting because what he's doing is he's just putting the pieces on the natural squares. Nothing wrong with queen c2. I think f3 would be kind of interesting in this position. So this is all very well-known kind of theory. And one thing I'm going to laugh at myself a little bit here. I've had this structure many times, Carlsbad structure. And every time I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to be a nice, peaceful affair. And through experience, I'm like, no, there's going to be blood. There's going to be real blood. At first, it looks so tame. It looks like nothing's going to happen. But no, that's never the case in these. These things are violent. That's what I can attest to. So going over your games provides you with insight like that, just like, right, this is going to become very violent later. Okay. Another thing I would like to stress about the dojo training program that I really like is what we have for the opening study is to have people play out model games. And what that would mean in this case, we have our own repertoires. This isn't part of it, but I love this position for white. And what it means then is for Tim to find his own games to look at, to whether they're GM games or just games maybe at around his level, to look at how they've gone, to analyze them, look at how the middle game positions look. And I bring it up because for me, this position, there are several games of Kasparov from the 1980s, early 90s. Fantastic play by white. And there's all kinds of things black can do here. Knight f8, knight e4, all kinds of things. And so gaining a sense of just the standard positions that can result are really important, more important than any kind of like memorization of specific lines. Okay, and he writes about that well here. So a5, he finds that a little weird. I find it a little weird. It's probably playable, though. f3, I love it. Okay, one minor critique about this f3 move is that he says it's to push the e-pawn. And yes, pushing the e-pawn might well happen, but I want to stress that f3 also is very much about, maybe even more so, first of all, dominating the knight, and then creating a situation where we can move the bishop back. Now, this moving the bishop back is nice because we would rather not exchange pieces, especially if we exchange this piece, if black engineers that trade, which he could have done if he wanted with playing a move like knight h5 earlier, then those heavies are activated for black on the e-file. So f3 and now b5, kind of a funky move, but interesting. Bishop f2, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give this an exclam. I think that's a great move. And that's a typical move that Kasparov did back in the day. And at first it's like, well, why did you do that? You know, it feels like, well, if we're going to play e4, then this is not going to happen. And what am I doing on f2? It's just a nice move for control, which allows us to potentially play knight g3, allows the bishop to later help with the d4 pawn. Just a nice move. Gets away from all these exchanges with e7, which we're just not interested in. Okay, so now bishop a6. And here is the minor critique I would like to make about this game. When I do the 2100 video, I'm going to talk a lot about how people at this level need to develop a sensitivity to bad pieces. So for example, in this position, black should be sensitive about this knight being poor because it's dominated by this pawn. This knight needs to get fixed because it's dominated by that pawn. For white, it's this guy. This guy really needs help. And this guy probably needs a little bit of encouragement in his life and might even want to get out of the way of the knight. So let's say that this is white's first big decision, and I think it's a very rich position, and there are several things that white can do. So I'm going to be mildly critical of rook ac1, and I'm going to try to explain. Rook ac1 feels to me like we're going after this weakness and maybe this weak square, i.e. we're going to mess with the c5 square. And I don't think that is what we should be doing. It might feel like that, but pawns are not people. And I think the more interesting moves here would be h3, intending e4. Why can't we do e4 right away? Because he could go pop, pop, and molest our bishop. No good. Another way would be very similar, would be king h1, so that our bishop could retreat if the knight came to g4. And then, like Tim mentions, I also like this move. And there, the knight does several things in addition to this big fat knight f5. He protects e4, and he gives this knight a potential way back. And we'll talk about that way back in a second. So rook ac1, I'm just, oh, by the way, Tim, Tim and everybody else, really helpful to write down the times, the time usage of both players, because that would give us a sense of like, if black was playing this all kind of quickly, this might be part of his basic plan. And maybe you threw him off with rook ac1. That would be reflected in some of the time usage. And then, of course, later we would want to know, just where did you feel the critical positions were and did you spend enough time? I would feel like you've played great up to here and this is like a first critical moment. So maybe, I don't know, don't want to spend too long, but about 10 minutes. By the way, a very good practical thing that I love what he said up here. It might even seem like he's not giving enough care, but I think it's absolutely correct. Doesn't know the exact theoretical moves. I'm not putting much thinking into it. Correct. Even at a 90-30 game or a longer time control game, you do not want to be thinking a long time on intuitive decisions. You want to save that time on your clock for when it gets time to calculate. And it will come, especially in a mess like this. Okay, so again, theme is bad pieces or being sensitive to it. And then I think black's move is atrocious here. Let's put a question mark. And again, in addition to putting the times, I think it's good to put where we think the mistakes were made. And I love the analysis here. A4 is very interesting. What's the problem with b4? Well, I feel like I've announced it, right? The problem is that this knight was terrible, and now it's going to be doing something. Thank you very much. Our one bad piece, suddenly, oh, fantastic, fantastic piece. Yeah, and we see this again and again at this level, where this is the kind of mistake that's made where somebody enables another person's pieces. And something I've said in other videos is I think a reason people don't become sensitive to bad pieces is often because their opponents aren't punishing them for their bad pieces. Okay, now here was an interesting moment. Probably just so happy that his knight got to move, Tim played knight a4. And I think that is with the intuition that came with rook ac1, namely that he wants to just really start talking to that pawn. And that if he took first, I'm just guessing, I'm trying to psychoanalyze a little bit, he's thinking, oh, now the rook is protecting the pawn. But the problem with this rook a6 is that, hey, that rook is just misplaced and will become a victim on a6. So if we start thinking not in terms of winning that pawn, but making his pieces nasty, then bishop a6 is a worthy move. And yes, he could take our knight, but remember, that was our bad piece. I don't know. He has to worry about that, but even if we went back, something like that, we're doing great. Okay, so let's look at the game. And then the very calm rook c2. So I think this is now fine. It's a little sad we're not doing our beautiful stuff on the king side, but it's okay because we're just going to force black to play c5. His structure is going to be mangled. All of our pieces will be working. Now, this was a weird decision, Tim. I don't understand why you didn't take with the pawn. I think it's probably the same thing. It just gives black more options. Funnily enough, the option that it gives him is a bad one as far as I can tell. So, so if you had taken here, then this move, not possible, right? Because of just bam. So he would have had to play knight c5 as in the notes that you give, where actually I think it would have had to go on like this, honestly. I think he probably needs to take with the rook. And there you're definitely better. But that's the position that, you know, he would have to get, I believe, here. It'd have to go like that. That's my sense of it anyway. I think bishop takes, you're just walking into that evil pin. And the white's a little bit better here. Yeah, for sure. So then this was a mistake. And I think black probably thought he was being very active here. But the sad truth is this bishop is killing this rook because we're controlling this square. Our king is wonderfully safe. This knight is abysmal. And this knight's ready to come over here. And not only that, but bam! Yeah, queen b5, and we're doing great. Great. Fantastic. Thank you very much. And now look at this move. Boom! Boom! There it is. Game over. Thank you very much for playing. Boom! Ouch. Oof. Devastating. So, beautiful game from Tim. And there was, you know, he's done several games, and I just want to stress, he has done the work in terms of the game analysis really well. And you could tell he's spending a lot of time on these games, which I really like. Helping other people, and I think he's ready to graduate, you know, into this next cohort, which is, you know, clearly a step above. Once you pass 2,000, it is definitely a step above, you know. Okay, so I love Tim's progress, and I think it's a model example of what it would take to reach 2,000. Having some openings, not necessarily you like memorize, just that you're familiar with. So important. Important not to be swayed by the latest YouTube video you find out there and like following some strange guy's advice. No, whatever opening you have, as long as it's following the opening principles, play with it for a while. Get familiar with it. That's going to help a lot. Go over your games. Going over these games like this, imagine he goes over a couple of these games with the Carlsbad structure. Fantastic, right? The Carlsbad structure will happen in other openings as well. He will one day have the black side of the Carlsbad structure, and then we'll have a sense of how to play it. Okay, so I'm really pumped about this, and we're going to do the road to 2100 soon.